Good afternoon, and thanks so much for joining us for an in conversation with the Director General of the Department of Housing, Mark Cridland. My name's Amy McVie and I'm the CEO of QCOS, and I'd like to thank the QUT Centre for Justice for partnering with us to bring this event to you. Can I begin by acknowledging that we're here on the land of the Turrbal and Yagara people and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. Pay my respects to all First Nations people joining us today, and also to the owners of the land across the state that you might be joining us on from. I'd also like just to take this moment to acknowledge the grief and sorrow that's being felt by so many First Nations people in this moment, by First Nations communities and indeed the broader community. On behalf of QCOS and our movement, I would like to express our deep gratitude to First Nations leaders who led in such an inspiring and deeply moving way toward the referendum on the weekend. And we are so grateful to have been invited to be part of that journey. The incredibly disappointing result from the weekend has only doubled down on our resolve to be an ally to First Nations people as they continue to seek full realisation of the human right to self-determination and to justice. So thanks so much to everyone for joining us today. This is going to be a wonderful conversation with Mark, I hope. It is an important conversation to be having right now. We know that there are around 300,000 Queenslanders currently with unmet housing need. Indeed, we are in a housing crisis, and that crisis is being felt right across the social services sector. At the moment, or actually on Friday, I'll be in Cairns wrapping up our town hall series, which is where QCOS travels across the state and meets with our partners, our members in place, to hear about the wonderful work our members are doing, as well as the opportunities and barriers that are being experienced. And right across the state again this year, we heard about the really troubling human impact of the housing crisis. In Rockhampton, we heard organisations talk about how difficult it is to attract and retain workforce because there's hardly a place to rent, and the places to rent are becoming really unaffordable. In Mackay, we heard our organisations talk about a rising working class who are homeless, and in Brisbane we heard about many of our community sector workers who are currently experiencing homelessness. So we have a new Department of Housing with a wonderful ambition as a vision to create thriving communities where all Queenslanders can have a safe and stable place to live and enjoy high levels of social and economic wellbeing. Now, I think that's a vision really embraced and shared by our sector, and indeed by the Town of Nowhere campaign, which QCOS has led together with 20 of our partner organisations. The underpinning vision for that campaign is a state where every Queenslander has a roof over their head. So today, I guess, we're going to have this wonderful opportunity to talk to Mark about how the department in particular is going to work towards that wonderful vision that the department has. So Mark has obviously a very distinguished background. He has been the Director General of Department of Resources, and prior to that was an Associate Director General with Premier and Cabinet. And he has been in his role in housing for a few months now. And so we're really looking forward to talking about where his work is at. So today's conversation is really going to be framed around a lot of questions that we've already received from members in the lead up to today. But I would encourage you, as the conversation unfolds, to put more questions forward. We are monitoring them and we'll try to get to as many questions as we can. After the session, we will provide a recording of the session to you via email. So Welcome, Mark, and
Hi,
thanks
Amy.
so much for joining us.
Of course. Thank you for the invitation. And hello to everyone online. It's good to be with you.
So, Mark, I might start with a question really about what brought you into the role. So, obviously, a very experienced public service servant, and also having worked as a consultant, etc. What is it about leading the Department of Housing that excites you, both from a personal and professional perspective?
Yeah, thanks, Amy. Good question. But before I get into that, I might just also acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land on which we meet and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And I also want to say to any of my team on the Zoom today that your wellbeing is our priority, and I ask that we all be kind and respectful to each other following that result on the weekend that you've already referenced. And per my message to staff, all my staff yesterday, we will continue to become a treaty-ready organisation, and we will continue to vigorously pursue the national Closing the Gaps target. So I just want to just give my team online that assurance, and particularly about being kind and respectful to each other following the weekend. So yeah, why it's a good question. Goes a long way back, really, and so I'll give you a bit of a personal story. When I started my career after my first job, I got an offer to take up a very challenging and difficult role that perhaps most people wouldn't say yes to. And so I rang my father when he was alive and said, well, what do I do? And he said, well, you say yes, because they might not ask you the next time there's an opportunity that comes around. So that's a philosophy I have taken through my career, that yes, just say yes and have a crack at things. And so when Rachel Hunter rang me, the Director General of Premier and Cabinet, I was at the airport about to board a flight to go interstate. She said, no, you're not. Come back to Brisbane. We've got this opportunity for you that we'd like you to take on. It's really important. The Premier was reframing some of the key issues in government around youth justice and health and housing, and applying new Directors Generals and Ministers to those portfolios. So I really only had one question, which was who would be my minister, and when I found out it was to be Megan Scanlon, it was an easy yes. And so I took on the role, and I'm really pleased to have. It's been about 150 days, I think.
Thank you for clarifying.
Yeah, about 150 days, and been full of opportunity, and standing up a new standalone department's been great. So to anyone out there, just say yes, have a go. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So it doesn't matter what the challenge is. Is there any parameters around around that?
Not in my case.
No.
I've sort of taken on various different roles that some people think you're mad taking on, but every one of them has been a learning experience and a gift to my career, because you do show a preparedness to take risks and to be flexible and to be outside perhaps your natural comfort areas. Yeah.
And so coming into the Department of Housing, I guess it's a new department, as you said, and so that's not without its challenges, but for our members, we would see that as an incredible opportunity to make a huge impact in Queensland. I guess, looking at the sort of scale of what needs to be addressed, how do you approach that in terms of standing up a new department and thinking about the long-term vision that you have as a department?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah, it's like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, really. But for us, having a standalone Department of Housing, that the Premier, in her words, to bring focus and energy to what is the challenges that we're experiencing in Queensland and nationally, frankly, was a good thing. And then they've backed that in. They've a standalone minister, a standalone DG, all focused on housing. They've created our own committee of cabinet, a housing cabinet committee. So that's very unique, and presents us with a great opportunity to go and engage regularly with the leaders in the government about how we tackle these things and be agile. So the Premier herself chairs that housing cabinet committee, and the Deputy Premier and the Treasurer are on it, so all the senior members of government are there and available to us when we need to take things on. They've backed it in also with a record investment, so we had, not long after we started, we received an extra $1.1 billion in the budget this year, and so now we have an organisation of about 1,360 people and about $2.5 billion in budget. So they have really supported us, and they also, I should say, brought in naturally aligned functions from other departments. So the $2 billion housing investment fund that was in Queensland Treasury to deliver 5,600 social and affordable homes came into our department, which was great. The Housing Delivery Board, the Housing Expert Supply Panel, the Housing Opportunities Portal that were all in the Department of Planning also all came into the department. So we have this great focus and ability to influence responding to those challenges that you mentioned. So one of those we've now got, I think when I got there on the 18th of May, the housing target for that department at the time was around 2,765 homes to deliver. It is now 14,100. So in 150 days it's grown in terms of our department's responsibility, which is, it's enormous, right? And all of those have got to be committed by 30 June 2025, and including the 600 homes in that's from the Commonwealth. So I thought that is amazing. We're also, we're putting record amounts of money into supporting our partners to provide specialist homeless services, which is fantastic, and having some great results. So with all of that, though, comes great expectations on our department. You are now standalone. You now have a dedicated minister, DG. You have record amounts of money. You have your own cabinet committee. So we need to...
Got to crack on.
We've got to crack on, exactly, and deliver some great results. And I'm confident we can.
Yeah, it sounds like there's lots of sort of pieces of the puzzle that were existing pieces of work, whether long-standing or newly established, but then coming in under the new department, and work already underway. With the establishment of a new department and with the Premier's sort of commitment that there would be this new sort of energy and focus into housing, the department, the Minister has announced that the government is working on a long-term housing plan, and we have a question from Kevin from St Vincent de Paul, and he's asking, with the long-term housing plan that the Queensland Government is developing, does it have an overarching vision, and how will we kind of tie all those bits together to get toward that vision?
Yeah, thanks. And thanks, Kevin. Thanks for the great partnership that we have with your organisation. We really value it. So, yes, our Premier and the Minister have announced that we are developing a long-term housing plan for Queensland, a 20-year plus plan, which is fantastic. And Minister and I were tasked for that very early in our 150 days, that we need to bring this all together because it's the clear message from organisations like QCOS and others that we needed to have one vision, one strategy that brought all these pieces together and responded to what we know are the challenges around. So we've been working on that with since day one. And it's all things. It's all about responding to the here and now. It's all about being ambitious for the future. And I do want to acknowledge Ange Wright and my team, who took up that task of developing the plan, leading that plan development for me. It's a courageous move when you take on a task like that and have to deliver it in record time. So hi, Ange, and well done. And thank you to everyone else who's either knowingly or unknowingly contributed to the plan development through the various conversations that we've had. And the Minister and I have been listening to stakeholders deeply since day one, and we think we're getting a fairly good handle on what are the challenges and issues. In terms of Kevin's specific question, I can't tell you what the vision is. It's great, but I can't tell you because it's got to go to Cabinet. And I don't want to end up in jail for breaking Cabinet confidentiality.
Fair enough. We don't want you to go there either. You've got a very important job to do.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I can tell you there are 4 pillars in that plan that the Minister has shared recently at the Housing Roundtable with the Premier that are the scaffolding for the plan. So those things are securing more homes faster, supporting Queensland renters, and end to homelessness, and planning for Queensland's growth. So when you see the plan, it'll be built around that scaffolding, those pillars, and it's very exciting for us, and I hope that we can are soon in a position to share that with everyone. Yeah.
Fantastic. Do you think we'll see it this year?
Well, that'd be my great hope, yes. That was the challenge laid down for us, so I'm reminding everyone that was the challenge issued, so we'll be ready for it to be considered this year. Yeah.
Fantastic. So I guess when we're thinking about a long-term plan, and the government has been fairly clear, and as you have just now marked that it's a 20-year plan, and I think everyone acknowledges that sort of the scale of the need in our community, regardless of how we got here, the truth is going forward, it's going to take us some time to address the level of need in the community. But one of the things that is clear is that there's, as in any crisis, there is like short-term need that needs to be addressed. There's medium-term solutions, and then we've got a long-term goal that hopefully we're working toward. Michelle from Wesley Mission has asked a question about, with that in mind, so thinking about a crisis response, thinking about rapidly increasing the supply of social and affordable housing, and thinking about things like the specific needs of particular groups like families and children. When you're then establishing a new department, even though a Department of Housing sounds like it's one thing, when you really start to look at it, it's multiple functions. So how have you structured your new department to enable all of those pieces to happen?
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm very happy to talk about this because we're very excited for that new department. So we've got that structure in place now, and it's 4 divisions, but I'll take a step back and give you some of the history. So I don't do functional reviews of departments lightly. There's 1,300 plus people involved, but in this case, we inherited some parts of other agencies, and we need to make sure that we could actually deliver on our priorities. So we started with that in mind. What were our priorities, and the things that I just talked about, like increased housing supply and rapidly increasing housing supply, improving the housing outcomes in the meantime, while we're waiting for that supply to come on, and then enhancing our homelessness response, because we've all seen the data around the increased demand given the challenges in the national housing market. So one of the things I wanted to make sure that we had, being a fan of good governance, is that we right-sized our span of control across the department. Housing previously was stovepiped under one point of leadership, and that meant that responsiveness could be challenged, timeliness decision making, how the staff felt was that not necessarily getting all the attention that it needed. So getting that span of control was the first thing, and that turned out to be that we needed 4 deputies in the department to actually make that span work, to deliver a $2.5 billion budget and to lead 1,300 people. So just
I think it's worth sort of emphasising that prior to May, housing sat within communities, and so
a broad department, a mega department.
A bigger department with multiple portfolio areas. So you had one Deputy Director General with the housing portfolio, and now you've got a Director General and 4 Deputy Director Generals. So I think that speaks volumes to the growth in the capacity of the department.
Absolutely, it's really important. I mean, that span issue is really important in my view, because one, it improves that accountability to drive real outcomes through your organisation. You've got the single point accountability in your leadership team. It really improves legibility for staff and stakeholders. So where do you go to when you want to talk about certain issues? That speed and responsiveness, with that span set right, you can make sure that you're getting really timely decisions and responses to issues. It also provides space for those leaders to actually have deep and meaningful engagement with the sector, rather than just short bursts of engagement. So they have their areas and they'll make sure that they're meeting with their stakeholders, and I'm pleased to see that the deputies are already out there doing that, engaging with their stakeholders. And probably the last thing, which is a really government thing, is that it gives you space to be in the contest. So government is always going to be a competition for resources and talent, because there are so many priorities. With that space that's created by the right span, we can be in there competing for what we need to deliver for housing for Queenslanders. So that is really important as well. In internal, it's all fascinating for government, maybe not for others, but it's important, right, that we are in there and in the contest for that. So 4 divisions, we've got policy, performance and First Nations. That's the first division. And our First Nations business it's like a mini department. It's fully vertically integrated. So all elements of a department, and that's the way we wanted to have that. We've got housing and homelessness services, social and affordable housing growth. So it's about the supply and corporate. The growth, that's really focused now on nothing but rapidly increasing the supply of housing. The housing and homelessness services, that's combined our products and services into the one division. So you have that continuous loop of improvement between those who design our products and those who actually deliver them, including our partners in the sector. So that loop is really important. And policy, performance and First Nations now has a leadership seat at the table. So they are there and they can influence across our entire business. So that was really important as well. So I'm really pleased with what our leaders developed in terms of good functional alignment. But now focus moves on to supporting our frontline staff. We're very conscious of that those staff are feeling the challenges in the current housing market on our front line. They see hundreds and hundreds of people a day, and that's growing rapidly. I think I saw yesterday that our Rent Connect officers in our housing service centres experienced a 27% increase in volume recently. So our leadership team will now turn to supporting our frontline staff deliver more outcomes.
Yeah, it is, we're certainly as a sector incredibly conscious of the pressure that's on the service centres around the state, and whenever we talk to our members about localised responses, they speak so highly of the hard-working frontline workers that are genuine partners with our sector in trying to find a solution to what is just such a distressing level of need for anyone who's facing it every day.
Absolutely. Well, also I touched on this. There's 6 very unique features that we've designed, new and unique features we've designed into the new department, and they're worth touching on because hopefully they'll reflect to people watching today that the comments and feedback that they've provided to the Minister and I over time. So one is we now have a dedicated community housing delivery team. So that team will focus solely on helping to grow the CHP sector, which is fantastic news. We've got a vacancy management team, so an end-to-end team that will focus on making sure we get our vacant and tenable houses back in the system as quickly as we can. So we run a very low vacancy rate, about 1%, but that still can be somewhere around 200 homes, and we want to make sure we get those back as quickly as possible. We've got a housing insights team now stood up, so that's about the data analytics, the storytelling, the proactive research and transparency of data, which is something the sector's raised with us many times. We've made permanent the homelessness rapid response team that James O'Brien heads up, that has been out working with all of our specialist homeless services to actually respond with the support of government to those who are sleeping rough. And then we have a strategy and reform team that's attached to my office, like an internal consultancy, and that's about really driving high priority business improvement, driving our strategy and driving reform, and that's the area also leading a housing plan. So things like that is a good example of what they'll do. So they're all new and unique things that are really reflect what our stakeholders and what our team have told us, and the things that are desperately needed in this environment. So we're really pleased we've been able to accommodate that as well in the new alignment of the department.
Well, Mark, it sounds like, what's it been, about 6 months? Is that
150 days.
And that sounds like an incredible amount of work that you and the Minister have done, and certainly I know from QCOS's perspective and from many of our members' perspectives that they've had great engagement with yourself, the Minister and your department, and to sort of stand up a new department, to be working on a new plan, to be providing that support for your frontline workers, that's a lot. I wonder about the sort of ongoing piece, which is to say we've heard and understood the problem. We've designed the architecture to enable the solution. We've mapped a plan toward a solution. How do you then, over time, provide the community with the information they need to have the certainty and assurance that the plan is being implemented and you're achieving the outcomes that you're seeking to achieve, and when you're not, that's explained in a way that the community can understand.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, one of the things that Minister and I found we have in common very early is that we really want to be transparent about what we're doing and communicating that regularly, and I hope people are seeing that already in terms of the engagement with the sector, and things that are visibly changed that we've gone into bat for, and they're not easy to achieve, but instead of the once a year open data release, we now are releasing all our data quarterly, and it's quarterly because there's 25,000 individual data sets. It takes 8 weeks to cleanse. So quarterly is as quickly as we could do it. We'd do it more, but you can't. You've got to protect privacy and do all those things. So moving to quarterly releases, releasing that proactively instead of that one annual release is just one sign of how we are changing the way we engage. I think the Minister's regular roundtables that she has with the sector, another sign of that. And both the informal engagement that happens regularly as well. So it's a real focus for us to be more transparent, communicate more, and and that is a cultural shift that takes time, but I see that happening in our department already, and I'm really pleased with everyone now having a better risk appetite through the risk settings that we've set to say, actually, we can share information, we can go and talk to people. It's not the end of the world if we do that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so I guess, I know that the detail of the plan is not something that you can get into.
Sorry.
But,
but it's great. It's great.
I'm sure it will be, Mark. But I'm just thinking if there were, I know in the South East Queensland plan there's some aspirational targets in terms of putting on the table the amount of supply that we are going to need in South East Queensland now into the future. I guess I'm keen to understand a sort of whether and how the department, if the department has supply targets or goals, how that would be communicated. Would that be communicated, the progress against those over time, and if so, how?
Absolutely. And we do, that's part of the new quarterly data proactive release that we do to talk about the number of homes and tenancies and what the status of those are and how many are vacant. So that's all out there. Like, I equated it to, that annual release was like Christmas. Everyone was waiting for that one time a year and you look at it, and it shouldn't be like that. It should just be that as soon as we can provide that information, let's put it out there. So we are, the housing register, how many people on the housing register? It's once a year now, it'll be 4 times a year. So there's there'll be, and as I said, it's as quick as we can do it. So yes, I hope that to see in a target in the final plan. Obviously, we've committed to work with the HURI and Queensland Treasury Corporation to develop a predictive modelling. That was based on one of the findings of the Queensland Audit Office that said you need a predictive demand model, and I agree, couldn't agree more. So we do, and we're working on that. So while that work's not due till next year, we are hoping that the work that HURI is doing can inform setting us a target for the future of how many homes we should see or should have. But look, it's a tricky space because HURI is not due to deliver till much later.
Yes.
But we're trying to see what we can do for the plan, of course. Yeah. But in the meantime, we're getting on with it. Last year we got about 75,000 social homes in the portfolio. About 55,000 of those we manage. Last year we delivered 858 new dwellings, which is a 109% increase on the year before. So we are rapidly scaling up, which is great. We've got the investment to do that. We're now at a focused department, and within that a focused growth team, who are just laser focused on building more stock. So and 14,100 homes to get done now.
Yeah.
So if you think about that rate, the run rate, it's a lot of homes per day that we have to add. That's not if you exclude weekends, it's more. So
So I think that's a good sort of segue into a question that we've received from Beck O'Connor from DV Connect, and she's speaking obviously from the perspective of running DV Connect and seeing the really, the fact that there are so many women and children seeking safety, leaving incredibly dangerous situations, and not being able to secure a safe place to live. We've heard some really awful examples of women having to move, 1,000 kilometres with their children from their home just to find a hotel where they can stay, which is obviously, taking a family out of their community, kids away from their school, mum away from work, is just such a poor outcome in our state. So, and we know that we need more crisis responses, we need more short-term accommodation, we need more room in shelters, youth shelters, domestic family violence shelters. But I think the big picture item is supply, isn't it?
Yeah,
and I think you've said that you've currently got 14,000 new homes in the pipeline. When did you say they're to be delivered by?
All commenced by the 30th of June 2025.
Yeah.
So we're about 5,000 into that target as we sit here today, and we've got, so I think of the number, we've got another 700 in construction right now, and about a further 1,600 contracted to start construction. So we are rapidly biting off chunks of the elephant to deliver, and we're doing as fast as we can. But to go back to the issue you raised, yes, I have looked at the trend data over a long period of time, and people who are on our housing register who cite escaping domestic and family violence as primary or secondary reason for being on the register for needing application has been increasing year on year, and it's quite stark. And I think, we say that all of our housing stock, when it's available, is available, but noting that we're running very low vacancy rates, we need other solutions as well. So our colleagues in Department of Justice and Attorney General that run the shelters program, they want to expand. We're looking at that as part of the Queensland Housing Plan about what the demand curve looks like and how much we need to expand those responses. But in the meantime, the immediate housing response for families package that came out of the summit is working. It is providing immediate accommodation, but it's not a long-term solution. We recognise that, so we need to continue to advance the whole spectrum of options, particularly in this space. And I think it's a point well made, and we're looking at everything. We're not just building from scratch homes. We are buying and converting hotels and motels, as you've seen. We're aged care facilities, things that we can rapidly change into more sustainable sort of medium-term accommodation while we wait for the long-term supply to come on board. But it's a challenge. I'm not going to deny that response is a challenge. The Minister announced just recently that last year we provided 1.6 million nights of accommodation last financial year, and I'm really pleased that we had the capacity to do that. But at the same token, that's a lot of nights of emergency accommodation, and we need to find that pathway from that emergency temporary accommodation into medium and long-term settings that are safe. Yeah.
And is that, so how many nights did you say?
1.6 million.
1.6 million?
Nearly 1.7 really, being precise, yeah.
And is that, how does that compare to the year before that?
I don't know the answer to that, but it's certainly a lot.
It's a huge amount of nights in crisis, isn't it?
It's a lot of nights of accommodation. Not all of it's that deep crisis that we're just talking about, but it's a lot of nights of accommodation. So it is. I said I'm pleased that we're able to do that. We have a capacity with our sector partners who all work on this and who all provide accommodation services that we are able to do it. But we also need those medium to long-term solutions because it's not ideal, some of that accommodation.
No, we want to see that trending down.
Yes,
yeah,
and hopefully
and
it will.
Supply trending up.
Yeah, and that certainly is. As I said, we went up 109% more delivered last year than the year before, so that's quite
trending
an achievement.
Up. Yeah. So you said there's 14,100 in the pipeline, and that's social and affordable housing.
Yes, yeah.
So do we know what the breakdown is there in terms of how much is social and how much is affordable?
Yeah, about of that 14,100. there is 5,600 in there that are the Housing Investment Fund proposals. So they will be a mixture of social and affordable. We won't know the exact mix until all the proposals are analysed before the end of this year. But outside of that, they're social. So the Commonwealth 600 funding that came through the Social Housing Accelerator payment is new social.
Yeah.
The Quick Starts funding, the other next new 500 for this year alone from the state government budget is social housing. So and the Quick Starts program before that. So I think you'll see the majority of that will be social housing, but there'll be some affordable, which is, I think, going increasingly important in terms of housing option.
Absolutely.
Particularly in this current market. Yeah.
And how do you define affordable housing?
You know, I saw this great quote reported elsewhere from the 1980s of a civil servant in the UK who was talking to a friend and telling him he was having recurring nightmares. And a friend asked why, and he said, well, because I was having this dream in my sleep, nightmares, I should say, in my sleep, that someone asked me tomorrow at work to define affordable housing. So I thought, that's about it. Now, we do have a definition. There is a definition in the often read, I imagine, planning regulation from 2017, Schedule 4. So I know everyone will be up to speed on that, but that says is housing that's appropriate to the needs of households with low to moderate incomes. If the members of the households will spend no more than 30% of gross income on housing costs, right? So that's not an unreasonable definition. You know, Huri has one, the National Housing Court has a definition, but there's no nationally consistent definition, if you like, at this point of what is affordable housing. And I think we need one. Like, it's in the admin orders that established the new Department of Housing says affordable housing. So I'd rather not be at risk of not meeting expectations by not knowing what it is the expectations are. So we're going to continue to try and do a definition, hopefully that's nationally consistent. We're talking to other jurisdictions, and if not, we'll do something for Queensland that might allow us to do contribute as much to affordable housing as we can. But we're not sort of waiting for that. The definition is not the driver of what we do. So there's plenty underway through our community housing providers have affordable housing stock. We've got the Build to Rent project, which is delivering about 490 affordable or below market rent projects. We've got the HIF, as we talked about. Economic Development Queensland, through its government land sites, is delivering and affordable housing. Local planning instruments like at West End are requiring affordable housing contribution. There's the formation of targets in the new Shaping SEQ regional plan, which you would have seen. What's the contribution to the 900,000 homes target for affordable housing? So there is a lot of things already happening, and in a way. And you'll see more in the QHP, the Queensland Housing Plan as well, but in a way, having a little bit of freedom and movement about what's affordable means we can probably push the boundaries a little and deliver more. But we'll still seek to define it because I want to make sure we meet the brief here.
And I just wanted to clarify one other thing. You were saying that the build to rent scheme, so the tax concessions that are being offered for proponents that include about 10% of their development as below market rents. Below market rents, and you're projecting that would yield 490 new below market rent dwellings. Yes. So is that 490 included in the 14,100? That's in addition to, isn't it? Yeah. So there's other things that sit outside that pipeline of 14,100 that are also going to deliver more supply of
the
affordable
Economic
housing.
Development Queensland projects. We don't count those affordable dwellings either.
Yes.
That they're busy delivering, and we won't count. Well, maybe even one day we will, but at the moment we don't count things like where there's local planning instruments are used to set targets of a certain percentage of development there. We're not. We may, but at the moment we're not, because I think some of them because the affordable housing is a broad spectrum from affordable to buy to affordable rent. My stronger interest is probably at the affordable to rent stage rather than affordable to buy. Affordable to buy can be a good product, can be affordable by design, affordable by location, many other things. But I really want to make sure that the gap between the social housing and the private rental market has an option for people on that spectrum to transition through. If you just have a gap between social housing and the full market price, it's a big leap for people to make, and I think that affordable to rent will help us transition people throughout the spectrum, because regardless of how many homes we build, I want to build as many as we can, we're still going to be somewhere around 5% of the total housing market. So we need the entire housing market to be working and functioning well, to support everyone. So otherwise, I think trying to say that even if 5% became 6%, you really need the private market to be working.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the things that I guess has been a cause of the crisis that we're in is a lack of supply being delivered across decades. So on average, I think we've delivered around 500 new social housing dwellings per year across the last decade, and we've obviously seen that very pleasing uptick in the last financial year, and we're going to need to see that trend continuing to go up. What are the things that we're doing in Queensland to kind of deal with the fact that there have been barriers to that sort of turbocharging of supply? Yeah. What are the things that we've done to overcome those to make sure that we actually can implement a plan that would potentially do something like end homelessness?
Yeah, thanks. Great question. There's a great Hemingway quote, right, that said it happened gradually then suddenly. And I think that's what happened with, COVID and the behaviour we saw there. I mean, we saw some data that the Treasury analysts pulled together that showed that, usually in Queensland you have housing stock that bumps along around, 8,000 homes transferred or sold every year. And then mid-2020 until December 2022, that spiked by up to 225%. So just this enormous draw on our existing housing stock at a time when supply chains and labour were challenged due to all the challenges that we know about COVID. So it really affected the dynamic of our housing market. And then we also had the largest net interstate migration in the country, and now absolutely eclipsing that is the overseas immigration. So these challenges around housing and building and supply are going to be with us, I think. I mean, we'll ramp it up, we'll rapidly grow to the limits that we've set, and we'll do that, but we recognise that takes time. So we are doing other things. We're buying or leasing former aged care properties, hotels, motels, a few that we've announced recently. We're expanding our forms of housing assistance that help people either access or stay in the private market while our supply ramps up. So I think we provided over 213,000 forms of housing assistance last year, and about 78,000 of those were private market rental products that actually help people either access or stay in the private rental market while we increase our supply. So they're really important because they're rapid. You can roll those out quickly, and we've got Rent Connect officers now in every one of our housing service centres, and I talked earlier about the volume of demand on their services. They're doing a fantastic job, and I think that buying what we can and rolling out those products that keep people in housing is a good thing, and then providing that uplifts to our specialist homeless service providers, because they are right at the front line as well, and through programs like the immediate housing response for families that's provided. Look, I'll get the number, but it's it's around nearly 80,000 nights of accommodation. So everything, and as the Minister often says, we pull every lever that we can to make sure we provide solutions for people now while we build. And I think that'll always be the case. I don't think we'll build out demand. We'll always provide a spectrum of products to help people into their housing of their choice. Yeah.
So one of the initiatives that's been stood up in recent years is the Housing Investment Fund, and I think that's been a really positive move by the government to set up that fund and to bring in sort of the private sector, the community sector, and government working together to accelerate supply of housing. And I know I've seen organisations across the state really looking at their resources, the land they might have or the things that they can put to work to bring on supply across Queensland. And I think that is because the government has put settings in place that enable community organisations and others to leverage what they have to be part of the solution. I wondered if you could tell me a little bit about some of the things that have come out of the HIF and where we're at in terms of the pipeline.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I was very excited to have the HIF join the Department of Housing through in May, not only because of what it is, but because it brought these very unique commercial deal-making skills into our armoury, if you like, to be able to, what can we do? So traditional buy and build. Now we've got this skill set about putting together deals with institutions and super funds and community housing providers, and I think we need to do all of that right to deliver on our challenge. So the Housing Investment Fund's a $2 billion fund, and what that guarantees me each year is $130 million to spend on social affordable housing. So at the moment our target's 5,600, as I mentioned earlier, and already we've approved to support 1,600 from that 5,600. We've already got 250 odd people living under roofs of homes that the HIF has supported. So to me that is a great thing. They may not be new homes, but they are roofs. They are still roofs over people's heads. So that would have houses that would have perhaps exited the National Rental Affordability Scheme and gone into the private market. We've been able to keep them into that. So that's great. So in all, I think there's been 2 rounds of expressions of interest asked for the HIF, for the fund. I think over 220 proposals were received. In the second round, it was 199 proposals. That was shortened down to 71 proposals that would fully subscribed deliver around 3,000 new dwellings of all different types and sizes, which was great. So we are right in the middle of checking all of those proposals, and the team led by Sam Beatros, who's doing a fantastic job, has had over 120 meetings with proponents to help them shape their proposals to make sure that the state was getting the best solutions and the best value for money. So we're hoping to have all that resolved before the end of the year in terms of knowing what we're taking forward. It's a great fund. It was $1 billion, now it's $2 billion. As I said, $130 million each and every year for us to spend on social affordable housing. It's a great thing.
And what do you think because it was sort of, I guess it's a model that has been used in other jurisdictions, but it was a first for Queensland, a new thing in Queensland.
Yes.
And so there's likely to have been some real learnings out of the first 2 rounds. I wondered if you could reflect a little bit on what you see as the future for the housing investment funds.
Yeah, look, I mean, to me, it's what I'm seeing now is a very mature commercial deal-making skill that can actually deliver the product that we need. And so I think, and that is a fund. It's not a fund that ends. It's not time limited. It's $130 million each and every year. So all I want to see that us doing is continuing to deliver. The 5,600 is our initial target, but look, let's keep going. Let's push on. I mean, you mentioned earlier Cairns. The HIF is enabling what would be the largest social and affordable housing precinct in Queensland through a project for 490 dwellings up in Cairns. Fantastic project the government's been talking about, put forward by community housing and also Limited and then Tetris Capital. So it's enabling things like that which we would never have done. The largest single social affordable housing development in Queensland in Cairns.
That's awesome.
And that's been brought forward by the ability of the HIF to not only have that ongoing funding stream, but to have that commercial and demarking expertise.
And I guess that, so we can hear that it doesn't just deliver in southeast Queensland, it's delivering in far north Queensland.
Yeah.
Does the model, do you think the model can deliver housing right across Queensland, or is it that it is suited to a particular type of development and there's other solutions for smaller areas or more,
Yeah, definitely tailored solution. My understanding of the proposals we received, about 60% of that would be outside of southeast Queensland. So strong interest outside of, where you might think, but there's high demand in southeast Queensland, but we're really pleased to see that data, those level of proposals coming through. Now, is there challenges in delivering? Yes, there's all the challenges that we have in the southeast, but more acute. So, the supply of builders and seasonal weather conditions and other things. But the beauty about involving other partners and the private sector more in this is that they'll commit to something and they'll deliver it.
Yeah. So we talked a bit before about, you put it in a much more articulate way than I'm going to, Mark, but you talked about the you talked about the market sort of having to function in a healthy way in order to, I guess, help to maintain the level, the amount of the population that requires a housing response from government, including a social housing response. And so, while we're talking about regional Queensland, one of our wonderful Town of Nowhere partners, Carol from Anglicare Central Queensland, has asked a question more on that market side, which is on the private rental market. And many of us have been engaged over a number of years now in the government's work to reform laws relating to the regulation of the private rental market. And I wondered if you could reflect a little bit for us on where that's up to and what we might expect to see in the short to medium term.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for the question. It is a good question, and it is important that people feel confident in that private rental market. There's about 760,000 people who are in that market in Queensland, so it's a large number of people who operate in that environment. So there's been some really pleasing changes some before I got here and some since, but the prohibition of no grounds evictions I thought was a really good advancement in terms of the balance between landlords and tenants. I think limiting the rent frequency increase to once in 12 months is a good thing, and there's a discussion paper that was out recently about expanding that from the tenant to the property itself, so we'll engage with government about that. We've got the stage 2 reforms that were put out, I think in May from memory, just after I started for consultation. We got 5,600 submissions on that, which is incredible, right? And you can probably imagine that the tenants and the landlords had a completely opposite view. So we've got to really sort through that. And then also we're having some independent economic analysis done of the reforms and all the feedback we've got into informed decision making. So they were across, and I'm going to read this because they were across 5 areas and I can never remember them all, but they were installing safety, security and accessibility modifications, which you think would be reasonable, making minor personalisation changes, balancing privacy and access, which is something that comes up a lot, improving the rental bond process and fairer fees and charges. So, things like putting extra fees on paying when you pay your rent through certain channels. There's that. So we hope to engage with government soon to have the policy debate about, once we have the independent economic analysis of the options and get a decision and advance those. But there was also, should also mention the minimum rental standards that started in September, which were great, and I thought some of that was a surprise to me that it wasn't already a standard. That they have a door on a bathroom, or that you have drinking water, or other things. Curtains on bedrooms. So I'm pleased that they are now in place. That's really sensible. It wasn't in my time, but I think great advancements in finding that right balance between tenants and landlords.
The other thing before we wrap up that is, I just couldn't not ask this, is I think in the connection with the last housing roundtable that we had just a month or so ago, the Minister talked to the need to review the funding for specialist homelessness services.
Yes.
And I think she said some really reassuring words for our members and the sector around a review with a view to uplifting the funding. Could you give us any detail on what that review process is likely to look like and the timeframes for that?
Absolutely. So it'll be, and I think it's really important. I agree with the Minister. We're seeing the demand through our front doors, and there's a lot more of our partners in the specialist homelessness services are seeing that data as well. So there's no doubt there is an increasing demand, and I don't think that's going to go away overnight. I think it's here to stay. So, our view is that we need to provide more support to our frontline staff, and we need to provide more support to our frontline service providers as well. So yes, there will be an independent review, and we're talking about trying to land the terms of reference and who that independent reviewer is now, and thanks to all those who've engaged on that. The timeframes will be agreed with government, so I probably can't talk about those now, but the aim is that we would hope to see an uplift while that is happening, so not waiting for the outcome of that, to say, recognising that the demand is there now, and that'll be part of the discussions we have shortly with government. But look, the Minister's made that very clear that we think we can support all the frontline, be it our people or the services people, and that's what we'll try to do.
Fantastic, thank you. Mark, it's been so wonderful to have the opportunity to sit down with you. I think for so many of our members, they're grappling every day with the human impact of Queensland's housing crisis, and I think it does give great comfort to people to hear about the incredible amount of work that you're leading and the sophistication and the capability that's been brought in to tackle the problem. I love the new acronym QHP already, Queensland Housing Plan.
It's government without an acronym.
So to me, when we're already talking in acronyms, it's something that's really well baked and well developed. So we're absolutely looking forward to seeing the detail of that plan, and hope that it will be a plan that we can all get behind and understand how into the longer term we're going to make sure that all Queenslanders have access to a home, regardless of the level of income that they have. So I want to thank all of you so much for joining us today too. Thank you for all of the questions that came through and for your engagement this afternoon. We do have another In Conversation coming up on the 21st of November with Director General Mike Kaiser. So looking forward to seeing you then. But also the 2nd of November is our Community Sector Impact Awards. It is the night in the year where we get to really focus on the incredible work that you're all doing out there in your communities. Our sector has an incredible impact in Queensland, and we'd like to celebrate with you on the 2nd of November. So please, if you haven't got a ticket, please join us then. Thanks again for joining us, and Mark, thank you so much.
Amy, and thank you to everyone who joined.
Have a wonderful afternoon.
Thanks.